So as we talk about cybersecurity, and we talk about cybersecurity policy, what we really need to do is we need to think about the people. People are the number one attack vector. The people are the number one target that cyber criminals go after. And one of their favorite attack techniques is something called spear phishing. Spear phishing is, in its very most basic form, the use of a seemingly legitimate email that has either an embedded web link or an attachment that contains malicious software to infect a computer. Spear phishing is by far the attack vector of choice. Why is that? Because it's successful, right? Cyber criminals send out literally hundreds of thousands of spear phishing emails on any given day. And all they need is one person to click, and they have an opportunity to access a system. Think about that, one person to click. In 2012, the South Carolina Department of Revenue reported that the personally identifiable information of 80% of the residents of South Carolina had been stolen. 80% of the residents of South Carolina. How was this information stolen? The attackers used a spear phishing approach that targeted the employees of South Carolina's Department of Revenue. One of the employees clicked on the link, their computer was infected, and the attackers had gained a foothold into the system. Once they gained a foothold into the system, they followed a very standard attack approach. The first thing they did is they put a back door in so that if they were kicked off the system, they could get back in. Then they did something we call escalation of privilege. You and I are normal users. We have only a certain amount of permissions. The people who have the most permissions and the most access to information on the network are system administrators. So the attackers escalated their privileges from a normal user to a system administrator so that they could move freely throughout the network. Once they had established that level of privilege, they then started reconnaissance of the network in order to find the information they were looking for. In this case, the information they were looking for were the tax records of the citizens of South Carolina. Those tax records contained information such as name, date of birth, home residence, social security number, the exact same information that we all provide to banks and credit card companies when we are opening accounts. Once the attackers had found this database, they basically zipped it up into a smaller file and moved it into a hidden directory where they stored it until they were ready to move it off the network. They then moved the information off the network, compromising the personally identifiable information of 80% of South Carolina's residents. In 2016, the Office of Personnel Management reported that the PII of over 21 million U.S. citizens had been stolen. How was this accomplished? The attackers used a spear phishing attack targeting a company that was doing business with the Office of Personnel Management. They compromised an account of an employee in the company. They escalated their privileges, and then they exploited the trust relationship between that company and the Office of Personnel Management to move laterally from a private business into the OPM networks. Once they were in the OPM networks, they established backdoors, they created additional accounts, and they started conducting a reconnaissance to find the information they were interested in. In 2016, Yahoo reported that up to 7 million user accounts had been compromised. How were those accounts compromised? The attackers used a spear phishing attack, compromising the account of one of Yahoo's employees, and then using that compromised account as a vector into the network where they escalated their privileges, created backdoors, conducted reconnaissance, found the information they wanted, and then exfilled that information back to their networks. Spear phishing is the most widely used attack vector because it is cheap and it is effective. This is why your employees are your greatest asset and also your greatest vulnerability. We've talked at a very high level about the cost of a cyber attack. I'd like to bring that down for a couple of moments and talk at a very low personal level about the cost of a cyber attack. The average consolidated cost of a data breach in 2016 was $4 million. Businesses incurred the cost of about $158 per record stolen. If you're a small to medium business, you have, say, approximately 5,000 records. 5,000 records at $158 per record for remediation and recovery brings you to a recovery cost of somewhere between $750,000 and $800,000. 60% of small businesses that experience data breaches go out of business within a year. 41% of network outages caused by security breaches affect between 11 and 30% of corporate resources. 45% of those outages last 1 to 8 hours. 26% last 9 to 24 hours. Operation and finance are the functions that are most likely to be affected, followed then by brand reputation and customer retention. The cost of a data breach is larger than simply just the cost to remediate. Data theft by outsiders accounts for approximately 98% of all cyber attacks, accounting for 99% of all record thefts. In 2013, there were nearly 1.8 billion cyber attacks worldwide. Verizon assesses that most data thieves are professional criminals deliberately trying to steal information they can turn into cash. Chief Information Security Officers and IT managers identify safeguarding networks against spear phishing and social engineered attacks from data thieves as one of their main concerns. This problem extends across commercial and government organizations. In 2009, the National Cyberspace Policy Review found the nation's digital infrastructure, based largely upon the Internet, is not secure or resilient, and has already suffered intrusions that have allowed criminals to steal hundreds of millions of dollars, and nation states and other entities to steal intellectual property and sensitive military information. The continued exploitation of information networks and the compromise of sensitive data leaves the United States vulnerable to the loss of economic competitiveness and the loss of our military's technological advantages.